try. So what Judaism has has an identity that has aspects of religion, but it also has aspects of national identity. So in this class, we're going to explore two models of Jewish collectivity, one based on the ideas of family and ethnicity, and the other based on ideology and common aspirations. While these two foundations of group identity, by definition, don't need to be in tension with one another, they each do emphasize a different aspect of how one wishes to define their own community. And how one goes ahead and does this really determines a little bit of our relationship to who we are and what we're a part of, how we relate to other people, other Jews, and also how we relate to the wider world. So to highlight the choice between family as a basis for group solidarity versus common aspirations and ideology as a marker, consider politics. When do you put your political ideologies aside to feel solidarity with family? And when do you prefer your deeply held political values to what can seem like the accidental bonds of being related to someone? This is some of the tension that we're going to explore. And I want to encourage you to come a little bit with an open mind, because you're going to see that two aspects of what most of us consider to be the core of being Jewish are in tension with each other. Let me just ask I can't really see so much, but I'm hoping that you have some source texts printed out. And the two texts that I asked to have be printed out are one that is sources that have particular sources we're using, textual sources, and the other is one that has discussion questions. Ellen, is that something that you can cut and paste those links into the chat in case somebody doesn't have them?
Yes, but I can also share the screen. You tell me.
I think what we'll do is we'll do both. We'll do both. So what would be great is if you could first share the screen with the sources, and we'll start on the first one. And then if, as we get started here, if you could put the links to both of the documents in the chat. And also just scroll up a little bit to the first text there from the cover. There we go. Excellent. Okay, thank you. So the way that we're going to explore today, these ideas of being and becoming, and we're going to look at some sources together. We're going to break out into some small groups of 3 to study and discuss. We're going to come back and be able to share as a large group, and we'll have 2 breakout sessions. But being is really this sense of Judaism as being something that we just are, as being part of family. And we know this in our sources because what is Israel? First and foremost, Israel is a family. That Jacob first went ahead and, well, first we'll start with Abraham, and we're going to read a little bit from the Torah about Abraham. But Abraham was the first person to whom God promised that his people would be as numerous as stars from the sky. And Abraham, of course, had Isaac, who had Jacob. Jacob wrestled with an angel and got the name Israel, Yisrael. Then Jacob had children, 12 boys and a girl. And the 12 boys those families became the tribes of Israel. So essentially the people Israel, B'nai Yisrael, are a family. You do not have to believe a certain thing in order to be part of the family. And we know this because if you are born Jewish, if you have a Jewish mother, you're Jewish. If you have in the Reform community, you have one Jewish parent, father or mother, and you're raised Jewish, either in your home or through school, you are considered Jewish. You do not have to believe in God. You do not have to have certain beliefs, but are just part of the people. And that is really the sense of being. Becoming, which we'll look at in a moment, is the sense that being Jewish means sharing certain aspirations and beliefs, as in the people of Israel experienced God's revelation of Torah at Mount Sinai and were charged with a covenant and things that they had to do and believe in order to be a part of the tribe. So those are the two, and that's what was really called becoming. Who is it that we are becoming and helping the world to become? So we'll just start with the first text, which is about being, this is from Genesis chapter 12. So I'll just go ahead and read. The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him that curses you, and all the families of earth shall bless themselves by you." Abram went forth as the Lord had commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot and all the wealth that they had amassed and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem at the terebinth of Moreh. The Canaanites were then in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "I will assign this land to your offspring." And he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to the Lord and invoked the Lord by name. And then Abram journeyed by stages towards the Negev. So this first text, just there's some key things here. These are the opening words of God to Abram. And God's call to Abraham doesn't contain any information about why Abram was chosen or why Abram chose to go on the journey. But God promises that if he follows this unknown destiny, then Abram will be a great nation and will be blessed. And furthermore, God promises that Abraham's offspring will inherit the blessed status. They don't have to do anything to get this blessed status. They will just inherit them. And this marks the beginning of the idea of a Judaism of being. A Jew is a Jew simply because they're within the Jewish family. So when you go, we're going to look at one more source, but when you go into breakout groups, there's going to be two questions connected to this text that you can start to think about, which is, are you surprised that Abram is not told anything about how he's meant to teach his children? That's the first one. And the second, how do you feel about the notion of belonging simply because you were born to a certain group? In what ways is being born to a certain group incidental to who you are? And in what ways is it essential? So these are the questions to this text. We're going to go to one more text, and then we'll have a breakout group to discuss. So the second text comes from a philosopher and theologian, Michael Rishegrad. It comes from a text of his called The Body of Faith, which was written in 1983. He's a major 20th century Jewish theologian. And in his book, he focuses on his theology and depiction and personification of God. Okay, so this is something that he writes that's essential to this. The foundation of Judaism is the family identity of the Jewish people as the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Whatever else is added to this must be seen as growing out of and related to the basic identity of the Jewish people as the seed of Abraham's elected by God through descent from Abraham. This is the crux of the mystery of Israel's election. Seen through the eyes of man, a divine election of a group defined by some theological criterion would be far more plausible. It would have been far more understandable had God elected all those who feed the hungry and clothe the naked, or if our sensibilities are more contemplative than active, all those who have grasped the absolute or achieved nirvana. These are accomplishments of individuals and reflect unusual endowment or effort or both. But being born into a particular family is hardly an achievement for which anyone deserves either credit or blame. God chose the route of election and of the election of a biological instead of ideological people, because this was God's free choice. Rarely has any theology come to grips with the contingency that follows from God's freedom, right? So he's really saying that this is a surprising way to build the nation. And by precisely being a Judaism of being based on family, that's being the feature of the way that the Torah tells of the creation of the Jewish people. It will, by definition, include people of different ideologies or actions. And, there are many Jews for whom this sense of ethnicity or family rather than ideology is the basis for them feeling belonging to the Jewish collective. And this model of Jewishness will have room for much more dissent than more ideological based versions of Jewish collective identity. So in this, the questions here that you'll get to engage with this text is, what collectives do you belong to out of a sense of family, even if metaphorical? What do you belong to out of a sense of shared values and behaviors? And what happens when there's a conflict between each of these groups? Okay, so try to get that sense of which are the ones that are family, that are being, which are the ways that are becoming shared values and behavior. Where's the conflict, if there is? How does the notion of Jewish collectivity based on family influence who should belong? How does it impact differences of opinion and ideology between people? And how does the family metaphor change if Jews imagine themselves within different kinds of family relationships, such as siblings, cousins, parents and children, or spouses? Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we'll go into breakout groups of 3, or some maybe 2, and take some time to answer as a group each of these questions. There's 5 total. You can kind of look at, we're going to have, 20 minutes by which to answer these questions. Make sure you go around and give each person in the group a chance to share a little something. And what I would really encourage is give everybody a chance to just respond to each of the questions before you get into any kind of discussion or back and forth on ideas. Let everybody's voice to each one come out first. And then after everybody has had a chance to respond to each of the questions, feel free to use whatever remaining time to dialogue, to to get into different ideas and discuss. Okay. Anybody have any questions about the process before we go into breakout groups? And I'll just say I'm on an iPad, so I can't see everybody's hands. So you can just, if you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and speak. Okay, great. So, and I want to give just a big appreciation to Ellen Prince, who's helping with the tech tonight of breakout groups and sharing all of this stuff. Thank you for making this happen, Ellen. And we're going to go into our breakouts. I will just say that you do have to accept, you're going to get a choice to join your breakout, and you do have to accept it in order to go into the breakout.
Okay. Huh. It's not.
Ellen, exit the screen share, and then you'll be able to exit too.
Miles, thank you, dear. Okay, here. Well, now it's still not working, so hold on. Just a sec. I'm going to start it again, and I will do the breakout. Just a sec. Okay, I've got the 6 breakout rooms. Huh, it's the first time it hasn't worked. Okay, I'm going to close them again. This is very strange. Hold on, everybody. Sorry about that. Okay, it's going to close in 30 seconds, and then I will redo this. Sorry, everybody. Just a minute while it closes, and I'm starting it again. Oh dear.
Ellen?
Yes.
What just happened?
I've lost it again like we did when we were working on it. I've lost the ability to do the breakout rooms again.
Yeah, what happened was, sorry everybody, just little technical difficulties. Suddenly you weren't the host anymore.
That's okay. So that's
so I'm gonna try to make you the host here.
Okay.
But it's not
letting you?
It's not giving me that option.
I wonder, and I don't have the breakout rooms in mine, obviously, because I'm not hosting.
Right.
Okay. Sorry,
Yes.
everybody. Miles, Sarah, if you have any suggestions, go for it, guys. My other techie friends.
It sounds like when you reset, you lost the hosting of it.
Yeah.
So whoever initiated the hosting needs to make whomever the co-host again.
Yeah.
That's you,
Yeah.
Rabbi. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the host. I'm not having that option right here.
Do you want to can you do the breakout rooms from the iPad?
I can't.
Oh,
So you know what? Yeah. So this is what we're going to do, folks. I don't know why it's happening this way, but we'll have a discussion as a large group, and just keep moving forward. So so feel free. I can actually see everybody right now on this gallery view. So feel free to we'll look at the first question, and feel free to answer with that, which is, are you surprised that Avram is not told anything about how he's meant to teach his children? Anybody have any thoughts about that?
I am surprised.
Yeah, why, Steve?
Well, education and teaching and passing down to generations is such a part of our culture, I think, and our tradition. It's surprising that wasn't, and I guess, I mean, some of the prayers say it, right? Teach your children, but it's not clear to me why it's not explicit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, right, we know that the teaching your children is in so much of the Torah, but it doesn't really come until after that experience at Sinai. And this is way earlier. here. This is Abraham. This is towards kind of the beginning. That's just basically saying your offspring are going to be blessed. And what we know seems to include more than that. Okay, I saw some other hands here. Helen.
Thank you. I'm not surprised because I believe that being chosen by God is based on the belief in God and the adherence to God, and that is what Abraham demonstrated as the first Jew, so to speak, the first Hebrew, and that's the rock bottom basis of being Jewish, that you are chosen to be Jewish by God through Abraham. The teaching comes later. You have to accept the tenets of there is one God.
Right. So Abraham, even though Abraham had, it's like, it's the merit almost of Abraham that allows his offspring to have the same blessing, whether or not they believe in God. Right. Yeah, and that's kind of how one of the piece of how we open, that you can be Jewish by virtue of having Jewish parents and not believe in God, and not even do anything or practice Judaism. And from this perspective of Judaism of being, you are still Jewish. You're still part of the tribe. Other thoughts? Yes, Lois. Make sure to unmute.
Well, in the beginning, when Abraham and Sarah were instructed to go to this new land, Lech Lecha, they just did it. They didn't ask for directions. And so I'm not surprised that, Abraham didn't have an itinerary, so to speak, for parenting, because my sense is that they were connected to God, and wherever God was going to lead them was perfect, and they trusted. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my initial reaction to this.
Right. Again, that Abraham and Sarah, had that kind of faith and that connection and that identity. And then the question is, well, what about their generations after and after and after? When they talk about their offspring, that's us.
Yes.
We're their offspring.
Right.
So many generations later. Barry.
So without the revelation at Sinai and having the 613 mitzvot to perform, I'm not sure what more could have been expected at the time of Abraham.
Okay, right. Without kind of some kind of common traditions, teachings, those kinds of things, because Abraham could pass on his teaching to his son and his children and all of that. But if they didn't have a Torah that was, that was inscribed, that was written, that was all of those things, it's a good point. So let me ask you guys about the second question, which is, how do you feel about the notion of belonging simply because you were born to a certain group? In what ways is being born to a certain group incidental to who you are? And in what ways is it essential? And you can, I say about a certain group, you can talk about Judaism if you want, or you can talk about another group that you're born to a certain group. In what ways is it incidental to who you are? And in what ways is it essential?
I have a question.
Yes, Marcy.
For clarity's sake, so a Jew is descended from Abraham, is basically what we're saying. From the family of Abraham. Okay. So is not a Muslim a descendant of Abraham, and therefore are they a Jew? Is not a Christian, Jesus, a descendant of Abraham, and therefore Are they not Jews?
Yeah, well, in some ways, we all do have that common lineage. So there is really a way that we are all connected and come from the same root. Now, as we're going to learn, though, this is just the other part of it. There's more that has developed. Okay,
Well,
go ahead.
Perhaps what makes it slightly different is that we are the chosen, but my understanding of that is that we are chosen to study Torah, that we have the Torah, and that's what makes us different, not special, but perhaps different.
And that we're gonna look at that in kind of the second half of the class. But for right now, I think it's important to just really sit with this Judaism of being, which is that Abraham's offspring are considered blessed regardless of the Torah.
Okay.
The Torah hasn't even come yet.
Okay.
Right? They're considered blessed. There's a way that they don't even have to do anything just by being part of the family here. And we see that, now in our Jewish world today. Okay, so we have a couple here, Gail and then Len.
Okay,
And
so
then Heather.
I think the group, I would say the groups I was born into are essential to my identity. I was born an American, and that's essential to being an American is essential to my identity. I was born female, and being a woman is essential to my identity. And I was born Jewish, and that's essential to my identity. And I can't think of any other groups I was born into.
Will you say a little more, Gail, about why is that essential? Why are those different groups essential to your identity?
That's just the way I see myself as an American. I see myself as a Jew, and I see myself as a woman. I identify in those ways. I don't know how else to answer that question.
Okay, great. Len?
So as part of that, I think, humans are social animals, and we need to be part of a larger group. We don't do well in isolation. There's a few hermits out there, but generally we need people around us. So being part of a group is an important survival tactic. So I think it's important to be part of a group, but I think that people can choose, they may be born into a group. They may choose, that's not that group I want to be in, and change groups. So I think that's certainly a possibility. For example, the Jews who decided to go back to idol worship after Sinai, it's like, you're now out. In fact, you're now dead. So there's definitely, it's not like you're in, and that no matter what you do, you're in. You can always return, to Shuvah, but you can't just diss it and expect it to be part of the group anymore.
Right. So that piece, we will deal with that on the second half. Right now, again, I'm just wanting us to really kind of sit with this particular voice and truth in our tradition, because we're having both of these things. And it's an interesting question to say, does the Torah of Moses cancel out the Torah of Abraham? Meaning, does the Torah of Moses say, you either do this, the Judaism of becoming, you do these things and you believe these things if you want to be a part of it, or you're out? Does that supersede Abraham? Or
okay, so
or is that a part, or is Abraham an equal voice in our tradition?
I see it as a bandwidth issue. All right, God talks to Abraham. God convinces Isaac to be a sacrifice. Right, Abraham's a very old man, and Isaac is a strapping young man. And oh, sure, you can slit my throat. Go right ahead, Dad. So you need to have a very direct connection to people to be able to have that level of influence. And then when you start talking hundreds and thousands, it gets more difficult. So you need codes and laws and rules for the larger society to be the the director, as it were.
Right. Okay, thank you. Heather.
And I'm going to put my hand down here and put my face up. Even after all this time, I don't really have a very well-formed thought, but what I was thinking of was twofold. It won't start my video. Oh, there we go. Hello. The first thing I thought of was like royalty, you know, in England and such, and being born into royalty. And for me, that would be just awful. But you don't have a choice. I mean, these days it seems people give up their royal inheritance. But being born into that loyalty lineage is defines you in many ways. And I think traditionally a long time ago, it limited the freedom of the person and who they were. If they were the second born or the third born and they weren't going to inherit, was very essential to who they are and how they needed to behave, how many children they had to have, their decorum and such. Also, I was thinking of in-group, out-group, you know, tribes. I think if you're born into a particular tribe, when tribal society was the way everybody lived, you're obligated to take care of those in your tribe first. It's critical that you contribute to the tribe as opposed to the out group and suddenly inviting a stranger in. That was a later notion, I think. So I think being born into a particular group heavily, maybe not in modern day, but a while ago, would highly influence what you're allowed and not allowed to do. In this situation, I think for Abraham, basically his obligation is to have children, which took a while. That's a huge responsibility, and to make a nation type of thing. So I think by not telling him exactly what to do, it is a huge freedom. But yet he's just been told, you will have children, you will be blessed, kind of like you better do this right.
Got it. Okay, good. I'm going to just say right now, unfortunately, because of time and moving things along, I may not get to you on each question, but if I don't get to you on one question, I'll try to get to you on another question, and hopefully you'll still have something to say about that other question. So, you know, just bear with me because I want to make sure that we really get to cover all the material. So just for this question, I'm going to take two more, Donna and Steve. And then I'm very aware of Elena and Barry also having your hands up for future. So go ahead.
Well, in terms of Judaism, you know, as the umbrella group, it did break off into sects. And I had the experience of teaching in the Hasidic sect of Judaism as a secular teacher. And they did not consider me Jewish at all. And they let me know it right to my face. I'm talking about the children. The principal was a lovely man, but they really clearly are not brought up to recognize Reformed or conservative, or I think probably even modern Orthodox Jews as being truly Jewish. And I think that that's worthwhile thinking about in our, you know, as we go through this, because I found that disconcerting.
Right. Hear who you are and how you express and all of that, that suddenly you're on the outside.
Yes.
And part of this is that they were living a Judaism of becoming, which we're going to look at that in a moment, which basically says, you know, you belong to this circle if you share our ways of thinking, believing, doing, you know, all of those things. And in that piece, there's that circle here. And what we're exploring right now in this Judaism of being, and we know it from, regardless of how anybody else wants to treat it, the halakha, the law of the tradition as we have it today, is that if your mother is Jewish, this is across the world, if your mother is Jewish, you are Jewish. In the Reform community in North America, if one parent is Jewish and you're raised Jewish, then you are Jewish. So these are, but without even getting into what the more recent innovation of the reform movement as far as Jewish patrilineal descent and Jewish identity goes, in every traditional community anywhere, the law is the law as it came up, on Sinai, which is that there is a Judaism of being, regardless of how you dress, what you do, what, everything is, you are Jewish. And we know this, at least from, if you want to talk about the Hasidic sects, that, the very rare piece of Hasidic sect is Chabad, in that Chabad is anybody who is Jewish, according to matrilineal descent, is Jewish, regardless of what you do and what you practice and how that is. And it doesn't matter if you're Reform or conservative or this or that, you're still Jewish, 100%. So that is a Judaism of being. That is what just goes ahead and says, okay, Steve, and then we'll move on.
I want to talk just briefly about this whole idea of being born Jewish. And one of the things that first occurs to me is that there was a time when if you were born Jewish, you didn't have a choice. In much of the world, think about the Holocaust. We all lost family members there, my grandparents, the whole family that I never knew. They didn't have a choice. They were Jewish, whether they chose to think of themselves as Jews. It was thrust upon them. And I was born into a Jewish family, but for most of my adult life, being Jewish didn't really matter to me. I didn't identify with it. I didn't not identify with it. It just wasn't an integral part of how I thought about myself. Somehow, now that I've achieved alter cockerdom, I can't explain why, but I feel extremely different. I have connections with Jewish people that I don't have connections with non-Jewish people. All of the friends that I'm making are Jewish. I feel very much that I'm part of the Jewish people. And that's something that I can't explain where that came from. So for me, it's not that I've done anything other than get bar mitzvah, I guess, but I feel very much part of the Jewish people just because I was born, but there's some kind of emotional, mental connection that I have. I don't know how else to describe it, with Jewish people that I don't seem to really have with non-Jewish people.
Yes, and that is a mystery. That's part of something that we can continue to feel into and explore. What is the nature of that connection, and why does it have a hold on us? So Ellen, if you can share the screen, just want to look at a couple of questions. And I think what I'd like to do is kind of put some of these questions out, and you can respond to any one of them as opposed to going one by one. Oh, it's not that one, it's the discussion questions. I'll just read the first one while Ellen's getting that up, which is, what collective, this is, I'm on question group number 2, if you're following along. What collectives do you belong to out of sense of family, even if metaphorical? What do you belong to out of a sense of shared values and behaviors? And what happens when there's conflicts between these groups? Okay, so it's this is asking you to look at those different collectives that you belong to out of sense of family. It can be Jews, it can be your other your blood family and relatives. And what are the ones that you belong to out of shared values and behaviors? It can be political groups, it can be other things, it can even be Jews too. But what happens when there's conflict within each of these groups? That's one question. Another one is, how does the notion of Jewish collectivity based on family influence, no, how does the notion of Jewish collectivity based on family influence who should belong? Okay. How does it impact differences of opinion and ideology between people? So now we're looking at what is the impact and consequence of having a sense of Jewish collectivity based on family rather than shared ideology? Does that impact, how does that draw circles of who's in, who's out? How does it deal with differences of opinion and ideology? And then the final question, how does the family metaphor change if Jews imagine themselves within different kinds of family relationships, such as siblings, cousins, parents, children, or spouses? All right, so we'll just spend a little bit of time on, you can take the questions off, Ellen, and just a little bit of time to respond to any of those that you feel drawn to share about. And I'm going to try to first choose people who haven't had a chance to speak yet, and then move across. But if you have something, feel free to raise your hand, even if you've already spoken. Yeah, Mindy.
Okay, well, probably like any family, some members you get along with better than other members. And how does that influence? I'm just trying, it's a deep question. You can't choose your family members, right? You choose your friends. And sometimes you don't agree with your family, but at least I was taught to respect them and, try to get along with them as best as you can because they are family. And someday you might need them. Whereas if it's not in your family, you can sometimes be closer to them because you have different experiences with them. You don't have your family history with friends. So that could affect, your Judaism. Because if some family members don't want to participate in Jewish traditions, or some go overboard in observing Jewish traditions, things like that, differences come up. So
that's great, Mindy. So what I'm hearing is you're saying that, family relationships can either be closer than non-family relationships because of shared history and experiences. It can also be friendships outside of the family can be closer because of shared values, ideologies, things that you connect with. What I hear you saying is if you take the notion of family seriously, in that being taught to respect family and try to stay connected to family, then you need to find ways to tolerate differences in family members and in ideologies and all those things that you don't agree with so much because of that. Whereas if there's people that aren't a part of your family and you don't share those ideologies or those things in common, you don't need to have anything to do with them.
Right.
Why go ahead and do that? So that's a great observation to put out there. Let's see other comments here. Heather.
Hello again. I have two kind of random thoughts. So when things are in conflict, I'm technically trained as a librarian. And when I was going through school, they taught us that the American Library Association, it's basically part of their unwritten laws, I guess, that if the government comes in or somebody comes in to investigate a person of interest, you're not allowed to release circulation records on any of the patrons in the library, even if they're a threat to suicide, even if they're threatening suicide to themselves, even if they're threatening they're a person of interest because they have bomb making materials and perhaps they've taken books out of the library on how to make a bomb. You're not allowed to release that. But I'm not sure if it's me as a person and my morality and ethics, or if it's the Jewish person in me, but I feel like I would not be able to do that. I would not be able to tell somebody, no, I won't help the individual and keep something like that secret. So for me, that's always been a conflict, and I hope I never have to face that and choose. That's kind of random, but that's a conflict. And the other thing I wanted to say briefly was that I think the beautiful thing about Judaism is the welcoming of family simply based on Jewishness, say Russian refugees, people who have had a natural disaster who are Jewish, people in other countries, Ethiopians. I wouldn't know anything about them, but if they're Jewish, for some reason, I feel like there's a connection to a complete stranger just because they are Jewish. And I think the beautiful thing is it breaks down any preconceived notions and other types of barriers that may be between strangers, simply because there's this family, this connection. That's not to say that somebody who's not Jewish, I wouldn't also have a connection to, but I think it's really beautiful that some stranger could walk into a synagogue and it's just an instant welcoming, based on simply just that. I'm Jewish, I'm interested in Judaism, and so we can all be friends and family immediately.
Right, there's already some like extra support for connection just by virtue of that. Great, we'll take one more on this, and then we're going to go to the other side of it, the Judaism of becoming. So Elena.
Hello, everyone. Okay. I'd like to answer the question, how does the notion of Jewish collectivity based on family influence who should belong? I really feel like it only impacts it in a very positive way. When I think of my own personal family, because of them, I have established values, goals, aspirations. Sometimes they're the source of my joy, but also sometimes the source of my pain. But we're gonna ignore that for now. But a lot of opportunity, comfort, and in a way they ground us, right? So I feel like defining peoplehood through family makes that more embraced. And with family, once they're part of your family, you can't live with them, and you also can't live without them. Like once they're in your family, that's it, right? They're always going to be there, despite different ideas, interpretations of beliefs and how they should be observed. Despite the differences, they still deserve to be respected, and the differences and the diversity makes it much more of a rich collective. So that's what I would like to say.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you. So, I mean, so a couple things that you brought out there that I think are important to highlight is one, by living this Judaism of being, there is a real kind of commitment to relationship. Like if we talk about family in the best sense of the word, you know, of that you're gonna be there for each other through thick and thin. That kind of commitment is a strong thing. It's a really strong container to support us on this journey of life. And then what I found was really interesting is that for you too, when you talk about family as being a repository for shared aspirations and values, there's almost like a mixture a little bit of the becoming aspect that's going into family too, which is to say that for better or for worse, you can't separate values and perspectives on the world from the family that you're a part of. Even if you don't agree with the values or the perspectives of the world, even in your family of origin, you know, and even if there's ways that your parents are that just drive you crazy and you vow, I'm never going to be like that again, you still can't deny that it's an essential part of who you are. And so as such, has some way of being honored, even if you decide it's not the path that you want to take. Beautiful. Okay, let's put, Ellen, if you don't mind putting up the texts, not the questions, but the texts again, so that we can look at source 3. And you can
Okay,
follow.
hold on one sec.
That's okay. I'm going to just start reading just for time here. And if you have your own copy, you can follow along. This is the Sinai story from Exodus 19, chapters 1 through 6. We'll read this one, and then our final source is going to be, I think for some people, a very controversial one and should have some great conversation. So the source from Exodus. On the 3rd new moon, after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day, they entered the wilderness of Sinai. Having journeyed from Rephidim, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness. Israel encamped there in front of the mountain. And Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me." Right? This is all still Judaism of being. I did this all for you. You didn't do anything, but I brought you out of Egypt and I did all of that. But here's where it shifts in verse 5. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the people. Indeed, all the earth is mine. Right? Now it's if you obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, then. But you shall be to me, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you should speak to the children of Israel. Is there more? Or is that it for that one? No, that's it. Okay, you can go back down. You can take. Okay, so no, we'll keep that. So that is one piece. I'll just say, so keeping the text up there for a moment. This right here, the Sinai experience is an if-then. These are the things that I expect of you in order to be a part of my treasured possession. You need to obey me and keep my covenant. All right. And that's how you're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. All right. So that's a Judaism of becoming. And where we are going to see this, coming through is this is also we see in our Jewish world today, which is like you articulated, Donna, about this Hasidic sect. And that's in a kind of extreme version to say, you're really only a part of us if you do X, Y, and Z. And in this case, it's ritual. If you observe all these things, if you believe these things, then you're a part of this group. But it also, we're seeing it develop right now as not just about ritual obligations, but now ethical obligations. And what does it mean to be an agent of change in the world? This is now also being lived as part of what it means to be a Jewish person. So go ahead, Ellen, to the 4th text, please. Oh, no, it's the same one, the same sheet you were doing before. It was just, I just wanted you to scroll up a little bit. So what I'll just say first for this 4th text, while Ellen gets it back on, is this is an interview with Rabbi Sharon Brous of Ikar in LA. And what I'll say about Rabbi Brous, she's a rabbi in Los Angeles with strong ties to the American social justice world. She founded and leads Ikar, a progressive Jewish community. And in this interview here, she discusses the choice to build a Jewish community that's based explicitly on a progressive political agenda. Okay, so she says in this interview, when we were building Ikar, I realized I wasn't interested at all in the movement question. What I wanted to do was bring together people who were interested in asking, what does it mean to be a Jew and a human being in a world on fire? I don't frankly care if you identify as Reform or modern Orthodox. For me, I say what I need to say. I'm not looking to build the biggest, widest tent so that any person with any political perspective should and could feel absolutely comfortable here. I think in those environments, we become so neutral and so numb that we can't actually say something. Okay, so here in her version of the Judaism of becoming, it's not about the ritual things that you do that defines your Judaism, but it's in the actions, the social justice things, the progressive political things that you do that defines your identity. So now the questions I want us to get to explore here, I want to get to Rabbi Brause's piece in a second, because I think that also brings some more tension to the question. But before we do, just regarding the Exodus piece, the questions that we have here, and Ellen, if you don't mind there, thank you, you're right on it. How did the Exodus and the giving of the Torah transform the nature of the Israelite people with regard to Judaism of being and Judaism of becoming? Okay, so this is an opportunity, if you want to respond to this question, is an opportunity to look at, and I know some of you, when we were talking before, already kind of went here of, here's the development of going from Abraham. It's not just by the fact that you belong to the offspring of Abraham, but now there's something that you're expected to do in regards to being Jewish. The second one is, what does it mean to be in a community in which the individuals are tied to each other on the basis of biology, as it is in Genesis, versus on the basis of ideas, beliefs, and values, right? So this is now kind of looking at what's the difference in being part of a community where we're tied together on the basis of biology versus a community that's tied together on the basis of ideas, beliefs, or values. And you can also look at what are some of the beliefs that bind our communities. What are some of the beliefs that bind Jewish communities? So if we can just hear a little bit before we, and again, I want to ask you to hold back on kind of responding to Rabbi Brause's statement there, but just a little bit right now about this idea of Judaism of becoming, and what are the things that are important about that aspect of Judaism, and what are some of the challenges of it? And we can stop sharing. Thank you. Let me ask it this way. What is the, to have a Judaism of becoming that says there are expectations about being Jewish? Why is that an important and positive notion? Okay, so we have three here. So I'm going to go Helen and then Len. Go ahead.
I'm struggling with this dichotomy of being and becoming. I don't think there is being and becoming. You're always becoming, you're always changing. Being part of, I'm struggling with a lot of the use of words that I think removes the idea of God and the covenant out of the discussion of being a Jew.
Okay, so maybe look at it this way, and this is the kind of the way that I'm reading the becoming piece, because it's the becoming piece that is what you're speaking to, which is about the covenant, which is that the becoming piece is that we are all aspiring to be better people and live our Judaism in more meaningful ways, right?
That is being a Jew.
Oh,
that's the being also.
Okay, exactly. And it is, and I totally understand your problem with the dichotomy. And I think what it's useful is for this conversational purpose to try to tease out what our values are. I think in this case, though, is what it says is your definition of being a Jew means to always be aspiring towards living the covenant in more meaningful ways. You feel that being a Jew has expectations on you. And that is what they're defining as the Judaism of becoming, meaning that you don't get to just sit on your tuchus and just not engage with Judaism at all and just be Jewish and have that be meaningful.
Well,
And
you can, and it may be meaningful to you. It may be enough that you are born a Jew or become a Jew by choice or whatever it is, but it's enough knowing that you have the covenant. Not everyone feels the need to continue performing the covenant between
right,
God and man.
right, exactly. And so what we're saying is, for if that's the case, and not that, when you were speaking, Steve Backer, not to say that the covenant isn't important to you at all, but what I heard you saying specifically was, as you've gotten older, you've just found more meaning in just being Jewish without having to do anything Jewish, just being part of that. And that really is what's being articulated as the Judaism of being. And yet there's this other aspect that says, no, just being Jewish of itself isn't meaningful in and of itself. I need to be engaged and inspiring and becoming more of myself as a Jew. It's not a static state here. And that's the other piece of it. That's the Sinai part. And both are part of our tradition. It's not one or the other. And what we'll find is that there are some people that say the Judaism of being is the only thing that's important to me. And what are the consequences of that to our Jewish lives, to our being a blessing in the world? And what are the benefits of that? On the other hand, there are people that are only, the Judaism of becoming is what is most important. And they don't have a whole lot of space for the Judaism of being. What are the benefits of that? And what are the challenges? So this is kind of what we're putting on. Okay, so Len and then Steve Blanc.
Okay, so I see it as the opportunity or the structure to enlarge, enhance, and expand the influence of this small tribe across the world, across Israel and the world. So having folks who say, I was born Jewish, I'm cool, okay, and just kind of hang out and do nothing. You're not part of a team that's all pulling together in the same direction. People could be heading off in different directions, and I'm still Jewish, but I'm heading off in that direction. And so you're not getting the benefit and the influence of a large group heading in the same direction. I mean, we're Jewish, it's cat herding, right? So it's not all, the exact same direction, but it's sort of the same general direction. And that's the becoming part of it, that by doing that, making the effort to become, you have more influence, the Jewish people has more influence in the world.
Okay, beautiful, Len. So what you're articulating when you talk about impact and influence of the Jewish people in the world is that there is a mission to the Jewish people. You talked about it as a direction, that we're not just here to just hang out and eat hummus, together, but that there's a contribution that the Jewish people need to make to the world, and that's that Judaism of becoming. Now, again, when you say we're all going in the same direction, are we? Because that's also one of the challenges of the Judaism of becoming, which is what happens when we have different ideas of what that direction is. What happens when we interpret the Torah in different ways as saying that we're going to, do something differently? In a moment, we're gonna look at Rabbi Brause's comment, in that, and look at that. What happens if you do not subscribe to a progressive political agenda and live your Judaism that way? Who gets to define what that Judaism of becoming looks like? So that's part of the tension in here on both sides. Steve.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with this concept. I mean, and I think we have to look at it through a lens of thousands of years we've been living like this. So differentiating them can be a bit challenging, and I think it's kind of been said, and being Jewish is one thing, and all of us are Jewish, based on our family and our birth. Becoming sounds more to me like, okay, so what does it mean? And how do you live a Jewish life? And there's broad aspects to that: being kind, being giving, being helpful, being learning, studying, being open. So there are basic fundamental things about becoming Jewish. I will be interested in the next part of this discussion, because in my mind, it's as you're kind of implying, and we understand, there's lots of ways to help the planet and help our fellow man and be live in a becoming way. And when you start to define what that is at the exclusion of others who don't do that, then in my opinion, you're moving away from Judaism, because you're just saying that it's my way or the highway. You have the right to say that, and you have the right to congregate and create a temple and create a group that's focused in that way. But to me, it's not very inclusive, because there are different ways to become. And we all know it when we see it. And so in my mind, that's how I see the difference between them. And I kind of get that. And I think as we go through life, a bar mitzvah is an inflection point where you're becoming. There's things you should or are encouraged to do to help others as part of bar mitzvahs very often. And as you grow and you raise children, this all becomes more meaningful to you. So I think that's a pathway that Jews follow. They don't have to, and the degrees of it vary, but they all can be meaningful and make the world a better place.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm just going to take Ellen's comment here, and then we're going to go to the questions for the last source, and that will be the encapsulate the rest of our evening. I'm going to say that we probably have about 15 minutes or so left of the class. So go ahead, Ellen.
Well, Steve, first I have to say that I have not much to say, because even my way or the highway was what I was going to say. So, I mean, everything Steve said, absolutely. And also, being Jewish, yes, many of us are born Jewish, as I was born Jewish, but there's also being Jewish as a Jew by choice. So that in itself, that too, I think needs to be part of the picture. And becoming, again, it's very interpretive. We're not clones of one another. We all become differently because we all have our own minds, and we're human beings. We're not Pavlov's dogs and are trained a certain way. So now that I have more time in my life and I'm not working as many jobs, I'm becoming more learned in Judaism. That has become my new path over the past few years. But there's also, again, the Jew by choice. I think they are being Jewish even more so, because they have chosen that path of becoming. So one doesn't negate the other, one starts it, and then the other is losing a cliche, is the journey.
Thank you, Ellen. Appreciate that. And also, yeah, it's very important to also look at that one of the things that makes Judaism a peoplehood or a tribe, a people, is the fact that that you can choose Judaism and go through a process of becoming just as much part of the people as being born into the people. That's why it's also not a race or an ethnicity or any of those pieces that are there. So thank you for articulating that also, Ellen. Okay, so if you could put up the questions for the last section. Okay, and so for question group number 4, and this is really about Rabbi Brause's statement, which is, it is basically saying that she's not looking to build the biggest, widest tent so that any person with any political perspective should and could feel comfortable here. And she makes a statement that says, in those environments, we can become so neutral and so numb that we can't actually say something. That for her, it's not about the Judaism of becoming, that's not about ritual, but it's about action and it's about social justice. So one question here is, in what ways does this approach to the Jewish community resonate? Oh, if we can have that back. In what ways does this approach to the Jewish community resonate with you, and which ways does it not? And I'd love to hear, we also heard from 2 people, that shared that it did not resonate with them, but I really also want to encourage, if this does resonate with you, please speak up and share why. The second question is, how does the choice of progressive politics to define Judaism of becoming interact with the Judaism of being? What about the relationship between Jews who have less progressive politics? So this is a really, I really would like us to try to take this perspective on and look at what are the consequences of holding on to a Judaism of becoming in this way. But I also would love, even if this is not your perspective, to try to consider, what are the benefits? What are the benefits of being, whether it's this particular version of a Judaism of becoming, but it can also be another version of a Judaism of becoming. It can be the version of the Hasidic sects that you talked about, Donna, of really looking at, this is the way that our Torah speaks to us. This is the way that we live out the mission. What are the benefits and drawbacks of that? And, and you can also respond to this third question, which, what values or activities would you like to make the bedrock of your collective community? Okay, thank you. Now we can go back to the gallery view and have some discussion. All right, so we've got Andrew and then Miles and Sarah. We'll start there.
Reference to the first question, I think this approach, and I know I don't sound very inclusive by saying this, but this approach to Judaism actually sort of resonates with me completely, and it's historically accurate. We talk about conservative and reform and orthodox as if it's some kind of 20th century phenomenon that we're dealing with. This goes back to the days of the temple and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Zealots. And Judaism has splintered into exclusive groups warring with each other over who's right for its entire history. And yet we're still here. I think that's, maybe one of the great beauties of Judaism. And I think we're, lately, I feel like, the world tries to paint us with one brush. But I don't, especially want to be somehow identified as, in the same group as Sheldon Adelson. So, I think, even among the Orthodox Jews who, we talk about as if they're a monolith, they're not. There's 1,000 sects of even Hasidim, there's, 100 sects. And so this idea, I actually think I'm really comfortable with the idea of a fairly non-inclusive Judaism, and the idea that we can all identify with that part of Judaism which we believe in and which is important to us, without frankly having to buy into all of it and yet still be Jews.
Beautiful. Thank you. So Andrew, what you're, I think I want to highlight the piece that you said, that what's being expressed here in some ways is nothing new, right? There have always, you've highlighted that there's always been sects of Judaism, all the way back to rabbinic times, of people that looked at things and saw things differently. And we can see that, I mean, in just studying Jewish history, it goes up all the way through every decade, of not decade, but millennium, from medieval times up till now. And one might say that part of what allows those varied expressions of Judaism, of becoming to continue for the Jewish people to continue to stay together, is maybe the very fact that it's countered by this sense of Judaism of being, right? That even though I don't buy into that Hasidic perspective or that progressive political perspective or whatever that is, I can look and say, they're still just as much of a Jew as I am, even though they want to express it in totally different ways. And even though they just want to be with other Jews or focus their time with other Jews that want to express it in that way. That's okay. That's what I hear you saying. Miles and Sarah, and then
No, I mean,
Mindy.
it's certainly
Oh. Sorry, did you have one other thing, Andrew?
No, you seem to be inviting a response, but I misinterpreted.
Okay, sorry. Miles and Sarah, and then Mindy, and then maybe we'll go back to Steve. We'll see if there's another. Go ahead, Miles.
Thank you. So I believe that as Jews, we all live under Abraham's tent. And as such, it's like the Midrash. We go as we go, and it is what it is. And we all do, I think, what we need to do to go along, to get along to a certain point. I believe that there should be a little bit more dialogue and playing nice in the sandbox. My only concern in the philosophy of being so diverse is that there's no ability to be divergent. We all dig in, and that's counterproductive to our peoples as a whole. And I listen to all sorts of different podcasts, especially Ikar. And one of my concerns is that if, for example, our younger people believe that by doing just simply social justice, whatever it is, that's okay to be Jewish. But then when they bring up their children, if there's no foundation or no other desires, at what point do we start to come apart at the seams? Because we could identify as Jews, but where's the thirst for knowledge or the desire to have at least an understanding of who we are? So I like the ability to have everybody under one tent, but at some point I think we should all agree to play nice in the sandbox and at least have a basic understanding that from generation to generation is instilled in our children so that we can continue to thrive and perpetuate. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Miles. So you're what I hear you saying is that it's really about you want to have a wide, like a certain vision, maybe a wider vision of this Judaism of becoming. That Judaism of becoming is not just about social justice, but also includes other values, teachings, learning, rituals, that there's a sense of what does it mean to really educate our children in what it means to be Jewish, that you want to make sure that that's a very robust, and multifaceted educational process.
Can I add one thing into that, please?
Yeah, yeah.
I know for myself growing up, it was all the richness. It was all of the traditions and the coming together as a community that created that impetus for me to have the love and desire to become more aware and more educated and more involved. Now, that's not going to be for everyone, but if people are exposed at a younger age to the joys and the pleasures of those things, I think there's a better chance of them to get excited about it and stay excited, or at least be a part of it throughout their life, whether they come and go.
Thank you. Okay, so let's do Mindy, Heather, and Steve.
Okay. Okay. As a former member of ICAR, I would just like to say that the experience at ICAR is unlike any other that I have ever experienced, and it is one of inclusivity very much. And in terms of including the children and having them learn, they have a prayer ground well, they used to have services in a, well, they still do, in a gym. So part of the gym was partitioned off with toys and such. So little baby infants, and I'm talking about babies, were there from the get-go. So they very much are included babies, people of all different types, the span of Jews from many countries around the world. Yes, her politics are very progressive, but so is the teaching and the actions. And the actions that that they are involved in are feeding the hungry, having them have a decent place to sleep. Many of the issues that we ourselves are facing in our cities. So I think just reading the little blurb that we did from her does not necessarily give an accurate picture of what ICAR is and what ICAR does. So that's just my thing on that. And in terms of becoming, I think because if you ever have a chance to go to listen to an ICAR service, do so, because their music and the incorporation of people coming and going throughout the service, making it very comfortable to just be in prayer, listen to the music, be part of the music. I mean, people are standing up, singing, clapping, dancing through, pretty much throughout the service. It's a Judaism that is alive and thriving. So that is all I was. So in becoming that, yeah, you might not agree with her politics, but what she and several other rabbis are doing in that community, we should all look at. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Mindy. I mean, it wasn't bringing out the particular piece of text wasn't to make any comment about ICAR as a community, but I will echo, and I think it's important in relation to what Miles said as well, is that ICAR has one of the most vibrant worship communities out there ever. I mean, as far as prayer, even as their prayer is the form of it with music and singing and everything has so much energy. It also follows very much of the traditional form, the traditional matbea form. So there are so many ways in which ICAR, besides the social justice, social action work that they're doing, is also transmitting to their children and to others, Jewish ritual and in very meaningful, robust ways. I think the piece here that we're speaking about is that it's very difficult. It really, I would say that in order to feel comfortable at ICAR, you do need to share a certain perspective on what Torah is saying about how we should act and be in the world. And that is, and that is this Judaism of belonging, I mean, of becoming that we're talking about, being expressed very strongly in one unique way. And the piece that I want to make sure, I think that is the challenge here is, on one hand, if you get very strong about Judaism of becoming, looking a certain way, it does two things. The negative is it doesn't create a whole lot of space for other perspectives at all. And it creates a circle that does not allow, I mean, people can step into the circle, but really, only if they're gonna only feel comfortable if they look at things in a certain way. On the other hand, when you draw a circle, you contain energy and you strengthen energy. And so in some sense, when she says in her piece about, not wanting a Judaism that's numbing, there's something about it that's saying the deeper, the stronger you feel in your Judaism of becoming whatever it is, whether it's a religious Orthodox thing or whether it's a social justice thing, it can bring more fire and more passion and more action in whatever it is that you decide to do. And if you look at, the kind of fervor that's present in Hasidic sects, even though it's totally not your, may not be your thing in this way or this, you can look and say, there's a lot of energy there. And there's something that's very attractive about that. So I'm just wanting to put, that whole flip side of this becoming aspect of Judaism. Okay, we had it's Evan and Heather, and and I'll just say right here, Ben had a little comment to me, which is really true. You should also know that Ikar is only one place that does this kind of thing. There are other independent minyanim and communities around the country that are doing things this way. Okay, Evan and Heather.
Yeah, I'll just share briefly. I was thinking about it, and one of the things I love about Judaism is this diversity of thought. And I've been to Ikar, and I've been equally comfortable and uncomfortable there at the same time. I've been to Chabad and felt the same way. Frankly, I've been to some of our services and felt equally comfortable and uncomfortable. I've read portions of the Torah and felt comfortable and uncomfortable. So I think that it's good, even though I don't necessarily ascribe to the politics of Ikar. I think it's a wonderful thing that they're there. It stimulates thought. If you only listen to people who think like you do, you don't grow. So I think it's a wonderful thing that they're there and doing the things they do. And people who think otherwise should go to wherever they feel wherever they feel like they're going to grow and be able to do the things that they feel represents their way of expressing Judaism in the world. There's lots of people expressing Judaism in lots of different ways. And so that's what I think really ultimately Judaism is about. It's not a singular ideology in my view anyway. That's what I love about it, is that there's not a single ideology. And so that's all I had to share.
Thank you, Evan. So last comment will be Steve, and then I'll wrap this up.
Yeah, so, very interesting discussion. I appreciate it. And I appreciate, Mindy, your comments. I love you to death. So if you say something, I take it very seriously. I guess what I would say, though, is that, and maybe it's because I grew up, aside from my religion and personal background, I grew up in a Fortune 50 company as a sales leader. So confrontation and diversity and different thinking, that's how companies survive. And I had the pleasure of working for a company that has thrived over a 40-year period that I was associated with them. And in large part, it's because of diversity of thinking and approaches. So when I think of becoming, I'm very comfortable with any approach to doing better in the world. But I also am not threatened by different approaches. And I'm not, I'm truly inclusive to different thinking. And yes, energy can concentrate, but that energy can be to do good in the world. which a lot of synagogues or a lot of entities probably don't spend a lot of jet fuel on. So I just feel that I get a little up in the back of my neck when I hear about, I take inclusiveness very seriously. And I take diversity of thinking and cultures very seriously, because it's how I grew up professionally. So when you insulate yourself from different thinking and only look through a political lens that fits the echo chamber you're in, I can put business names on that, like Blockbuster and Kodak, because you actually don't grow in a way that I think is in line with what your being is. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I can also attest, Steve, that it is true what you say about yourself as far as different things, because I've watched you shift your perspective on different things in a conversation by really listening to another perspective and considering it. So to just sum up here, I really thank everybody for your comments, and we will make sure I will be back at my computer, not my iPad, in California for next week's class. And we'll make sure that we get to have some breakout groups so that we each can have more conversation, because I'm very aware that this larger group, doesn't allow for everybody to share or talk. But, to sum up, I think what I'm hoping that we've taken away from this class is there are multiple ways of understanding what binds the Jewish people as a collective, right? The second thing is that one way to understand this is through the concept of being, that people are part of the Jewish people, not by virtue of how they behave or what they believe, but just simply because they're Jewish. They may have been born to a Jewish family. They may have joined the Jewish people as a Jew by choice. This way of thinking about Jewish collectivity means that the Jewish people will undoubtedly contain groups that disagree with one another about how to act Jewishly, but are still part of one collective by virtue of being Jewish. Another way to understand what binds the Jewish collective is the concept of becoming, that membership in the Jewish people requires believing and doing certain things. It is not about being Jewish, but about how one expresses its Judaism, right? And this way of thinking about Jewish collectivity means drawing boundaries and leaving out people who behave differently than your group. Another major challenge to Jewish people today is the tendency for Jews to emphasize becoming and to de-emphasize being, right? And so, part of what I'm really hoping in this, and in our class next week, we're going to get really deeper into this whole piece and really look at the implications much more and of the tension between these pieces. But on one hand is, as we think about our Temple Bethel community, we want to have a community that has energy. And the way that our community will have energy and meaning and purpose is because we're engaged in a Judaism of becoming, that we're engaged in being able to practice Judaism in ways that inspire us, that are able to serve the larger community in ways that feel are needed. And at the same time, the very fact that we can connect to and feel rooted in a Judaism of being means that we welcome and we include different voices in our community that have different ways of expressing this Judaism of becoming. And how do we do that? How do we both, on one hand, find our niche, our place where we really find that Judaism of becoming as being meaningful, and on the other way, to create space for and even learn from those people in our community that have a different kind of Judaism of becoming. And, you know, it's playing with this tension that is going to allow us to really be connected and really be a Jewish people together. Thank you, everybody. It would be really great before we break, if you don't mind just putting one word in the chat or one sentence, if you'd like, to just kind of encapsulate your experience this evening. That would be great to just be able to say that one word or one sentence. Great. Thought-provoking, informative, learned a lot by listening, grateful, glad I'm Jewish, excited about becoming a community together within our differences, connected, inspired. Judaism's a wonderful journey, beautiful. Like the diversity of Judaism, yes. So next, thought-provoking, thank you. Next week, Tuesday, November 16th, 7 p.m. I will be sending out another email with links to documents just like this, new discussion questions, new sources. Please print them out, and we'll be ready for another wonderful evening of learning. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.